Hello Year 5 and 6, it's me, Mr. A. I'm back with my Hoover in the corner of a room for story time, the first story time of the summer term. And we're in the middle of Oversea Under Stone by Susan Cooper, and we were just about finished chapter 6, so I'm going to finish chapter 6 today. It's been a couple of weeks. We really need a previously on Oversea Under Stone kind of thing, don't we? Maybe you can look back through the old ones. Or just know what we've got. We've got the Drew family, and they're holidaying in Cornwall. Well, their dad is working down there, and they've uncovered this old map, which has something to do with King Arthur and Mark and some kind of treasure. And their great uncle Merry has just told them a story about how the forces of light and dark kind of face off against each other. And yeah, and there's also some evil people on a yacht who might want the map and the treasure, the Grail for themselves. So we're going to finish off chapter 6. Well then, Jane said, incredulity spreading over her face as she looked from one to the other. This must be the proper place, the beginning of the maze. All this time, without knowing it, we've been standing on the very same spot as the man who drew the picture. Just think. She looked at the manuscript in awe. Well, come on, Barney said, glowing with excitement at what he had discovered. We know where he started from. How do we find out where he went from there? Look at the picture. There's a sort of blodge marked on the headland. There are blodges all over the place. Half of them are blots and the rest are dirt marks. The marks of age, great Uncle Merry said sepulchrally. Well, there's a tier 3 word if ever I heard one. No, but this one's intentional, Simon persisted. Right here where... Gosh, it must be that rock you're leaning on. His great uncle looked round critically. Well, it's possible, I suppose. Yes, indeed, it's possible. A natural outcropping, I think. Not built by the hands of men. Barney got up and trotted all around the rock, gazing closely at its yellow, lichened scars and every small crevice and cleft, but noticing nothing unusual. It looks very ordinary, he said in disappointment, reappearing at the other side. Jane burst out laughing. You look just like Rufus, sniffing along after a rabbit and then finding there's nothing there after all. Barney slapped his knee. I knew we should have brought Rufus. He'd have been terrifically useful on a hunt, sniffing things out. Barney slapped his knee. No, he did that a minute ago, didn't he? You can't sniff things out when they've been hidden for centuries, idiot. I don't see why not. You wait. I bet you he'll help. Not a hope. Where is he anyway? He's with Mrs. Polk. Shut up somewhere, I suppose, poor thing. You know Father said he wouldn't have him in the house any more when he got in a rage the other night. Mrs. Polk takes him home every morning. And every evening. If she hadn't taken him home yesterday evening, he might have caught the burglars. Gosh, so he would. There was a moment's silence as they all digested the thought. Oh, is Mrs. Polk in on it? I don't trust Mrs. Polk, Jane said darkly. Well, don't worry about it, great Uncle Merry said easily. From what I know of that dog, he'd just have licked their hands and told them to go ahead. He doesn't like Mr. Withers, Barney said. He came to meet us wagging his tail when we came in off the boat yesterday, but when he saw Mr. Withers, his tail went right down and he barked. We all laughed about it at the time, he added thoughtfully. Well, we'll bring him out tomorrow, but we shall have to go home soon, and we still aren't any nearer the beginning. Gummery, could this rock really mean anything? Simon rubbed its grey surface doubtfully. Perhaps it's in line with something, Jane said hopefully, like a compass bearing. Look at the map, I mean the picture. It doesn't help. It could be in line with any one of those blodges. Well, then we ought to find out where all the blodges are and go and see if there's anything near one of them. Well, that would take months. Oh, Barney stamped his foot with impatience. This is awful. What are we going to do? Leave it, great Uncle Merry said unexpectedly. Leave it? They stared at him. Leave it until tomorrow. Come to it with fresh minds. We haven't much time and it's going to be a race in the end, but we're all right at the moment. The other side doesn't know that we've found anything. They watch me like hawks, but they don't suspect you, and with any luck they won't. You can afford to go away and think about it for tonight. Won't they come back and burgle us again? Jane said nervously. They wouldn't dare. No, that was a long shot. They staked everything on being able to find a clue the first time, and they failed. They'll try something different now. I wish we knew what. Great Uncle Merry, Simon said, why can't we tell the police it was them? Then they wouldn't be able to come after us at all. Yes, said Jane eagerly, why not? We can't possibly, Barney said with conviction. Why not? I don't know. They looked at Great Uncle Merry. He said non-committally, why didn't you tell the police that you thought you knew what the burglars had been after? Well, they'd have laughed. They'd have thought it was just an old bit of paper. And if we'd gone to them, it wouldn't have been a secret anymore, and we shouldn't have been able to follow up the map. And anyway, Jane said, with a return of the old guiltiness, we hadn't told Mother and Father about finding it in the first place. Well, Great Uncle Merry said, you would have said to them, we found an old parchment in the attic, and we think that's what the burglars were looking for when they turned the house upside down. And our worthy sergeant, who is satisfied that the culprits were just hooligans, would have smiled indulgently and told you to go away and play. That's right, that's just it. That's why we didn't. Great Uncle Merry smiled. Now I could go to him and say this manuscript is a clue to a kind of ancient cup called a grail that is hidden in Trewisic. It tells the real story of King Arthur. The man from the yacht called the Lady Mary wants it, and he burgled the house, and he has followed me night and day to discover it if I have found it before him. And what would happen? They'd go and arrest Mr. Withers, Simon said hopefully, but he sounded less convinced than before. The sergeant would go to Mr. Withers, who would of course have a perfect alibi for the night of the burglary, and he would question him rather apologetically about my odd-sounding story. Mr. Withers would impress him as a courteous and gentlemanly antique dealer on a harmless holiday with his pretty sister. Well, that's what we thought he was, Barney pointed out. The sergeant knows of me, Great Uncle Merry went on, and knows I do things that sometimes seem, he chuckled, eccentric. He would think things over and he'd say to himself, poor old professor, 'tis all been too much for him at last. All that book learning, tied and natural. It's turned the poor chap's head. Yes, I suppose he would, Jane said admiringly. I see now, Simon said. It would just sound fantastic. And if we told the sergeant about Mr. Withers and his sister asking questions about old books, it would just seem perfectly normal to him and not suspicious at all. He looked up and grinned. Of course, we couldn't possibly tell them. Sorry, I didn't think. Well, you must think now. And seriously, Great Uncle Merry said, turning his grave dark eyes on each face in turn. I'm going to say something I shan't say again. You may think the same as the sergeant would, that this is all a business of a private rivalry, an old professor and a book collector, both intent on beating the other to something that doesn't matter much to anyone else anyway. No, of course not. It's much more than that, Jane said impulsively. I've got a feeling. Well, if you all have a feeling, if you understand just a little of the things I was trying to say earlier on, then that's more than enough. But I'm not happy about having the three of you mixed up in this at all, and I should be even less happy if I thought you didn't have any idea what you were doing. You make it sound fearfully serious, Simon said curiously. So it is. I worry because I can only be on the edge all the time, acting as decoy, making them think they have nobody to bother about except me, so that you are all left on your own, with the responsibility of unravelling this. He touched the manuscript in Simon's hand. Step by difficult step. Smashing, Barney said happily. Simon glanced at his brother and sister and drew himself up, trying to look as dignified as it was possible to look in shorts and sandals. Well, I'm the eldest. Only by 11 months, said Jane. Well, I am anyway, and I'm responsible for you two, and I ought to be spokesman. And he floundered, and then gave up all attempt at dignity in a rush. And honestly, Gummery, we don't know what we're doing. In a way, it's kind of a quest, like Barney said. And if it isn't, then I suppose we're all together on our own. All right, Great Uncle Merry said, it's a bargain. And he shook hands solemnly with each of them in turn. Everyone looked at everyone else, wide-eyed and a little breathless, and then they all suddenly felt rather foolish and burst out laughing. But behind the laughter, they were dimly aware of a new kind of comforting closeness in the face of possible danger. When they packed up and were starting down the hill, Great Uncle Merry said, stopping them in their tracks, "Take a good look at it first." He swept his arm out over the harbour, the cliffs and the sea. "Take the real picture back with you too. Learn what it looks like." They looked across from the slope once more. The sun was setting down in the westward sky over Camaret Head, and the grey house, lighting the top of the headland and strange grey rocks that prickled its skyline. But the harbour was already darkening into shadow. As they looked, the sun seemed gradually to fall, until the unbearable brightness of it was over the outlined figures of the group of standing stones, and the stones themselves became invisible in the blaze. End of chapter. Alright, so welcome back everybody, and I'll be back tomorrow with the start of chapter 7. Yeah, alright, well, have a great day, and take care, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye bye.